Hello. The topic that we've been on, of which we've done 2 recordings so far, is holistic healing. Now, what have we covered so far? We talked a bit about common sense, using your common sense to understand the incentives, often negative incentives, bordering on the nefarious, sometimes outright nefarious incentives that people in the healing fields can operate on, doctors and pharmaceutical companies and even governments in their health policy, which may not be in your best interests to follow. We talked about the difference between allopathic conventional medicine, which is what all of us are familiar with when we go to the general practitioner or to the hospital or any medical clinic. Allopathic medicine is disease orientated, and its whole modus operandi is to whack the problem. I said it had value in terms of damage control, but ultimately it reduces down to either pills, pharmacology, or surgery, the knife, or radiation, which we know they give to cancer patients. Right, Belinda?
It's all horrible, yeah.
Yes, and the radiation can knock you around a lot. Sometimes for very little value, and we know the chemotherapy knocks you around a lot for very little value. I haven't prescribed anything. I'm talking here in general principles about approaches to healing. Now, in contradistinction to allopathic medicine is holistic healing, which treats the whole person. That's the first thing we need to understand about it. I remember a long time ago, I saw a movie called Patch Adams, starring Robin Williams. Did you ever see that, Belinda?
I think I did, a long time ago.
And in it...
He was a doctor.
He was a doctor. He played a madcap doctor. From memory, he used to go around the hospital wards.
He used to put on a clown's nose and stuff.
Put on a clown's nose and cheer up the patients and relate to the patients as human beings, surprise, surprise. And the story was based on a real life physician. So, yes, the Patch Adams ideal of addressing the person, the patient, in their entirety as a human being with thoughts, aspirations, feelings, a sense of humour, regrets, grievances, fears around their medical treatment. That idea that somehow it's not just the disease that requires the healer's attention, but the person that requires the healer's attention, was illustrated by the story of Patch Adams. And remember, a disease that manifests, whether it's a coronary condition or a cancer, some of these chronic diseases, the chronic inflammations, the chronic pain disorders, all of these things are being hosted in a person, in an individual who is an amalgam, a synthesis of body, mind, emotion, spirituality. The disease, in many ways, can be regarded as a manifestation of imbalances in that person's life. So it makes sense to treat the whole person rather than just fixating on the disease. In our Western societies, medical people and those who supply the pharmacology, they get paid when people are sick. In ancient traditional cultures, like China, perhaps in India as well, there was a completely diametric practice where if you were sick, the physician didn't get paid, but the physician got remunerated as you improved or as you were maintained in a well state.
That makes sense.
Yes, it sets a different incentives for the physician. We talked about words for peace too, trying to bring a tie-in to peacemaking, like words like shalom, which carry this sense of peace, completeness, perfection, harmony, and well-being.
If only.
In many ways, the task of the peacemaker is to bring about healing in the body politic and in the world, as though society were a body. And indeed, the social dimension of healing, we've mentioned, is very important. There's a horizontal dimension which has to do with the person in their relationships. Now, obviously, if these relationships are dysfunctional, they can very adversely affect health. I mean, at one extreme, you have this virtually epidemic of teen suicides. What's going on in the minds of young people to drive them to suicide?
Shocking.
We have the withering effects of social alienation. When people feel alienated and lonely and lack a purpose that comes from positive engagement with a community, they succumb to disease as well. Often they lose the desire, the motivation to live. And that can lead to bad choices, but it can also just lead to the slow demise of the body.
Awful.
So these are some of the things we've touched upon, and I've tried to recapitulate here a bit. I think we need to, I mentioned the horizontal dimension of healing, but there's also the vertical dimension of healing, which I introduced last time and which we need to talk more about. The vertical dimension is just the acknowledgement that human beings exist on more than just a physical level. They exist on a spectrum from the physical to the spiritual, and you've got the mental and the emotional in there. And this is important because problems with your thinking can manifest down through the levels to cause physical disease. Just as everything that impacts our physical body, everything we can take in from our environment, filters up as well and influences the way we think and feel, so too the thoughts that we have and hold and cultivate affect our wellness, our physical wellness. So that is the vertical dimension, and I think this thinking goes hand in hand with a concept of energy. What do we mean by energy in this field? Any ideas? Well, one way I approach this subject is to remember that we have a visible universe. We have that which is sensible, that is, open to sense perception. There's tangibility and visibility and audibility. All of that belongs to the universe. And we think of it as physical. But in the psychic world, in the psyche, in the world of consciousness or soul, take your pick of terminology, that's invisible. We could say that the spiritual is beyond space and time, matter and energy, by definition. And where our thoughts happen, for example, is not a physical location. We can't grab hold of these thoughts and measure them, even though we can measure brain waves. We might be able to measure their effects. It's a bit like electricity. You know, we don't see the electricity, but we see the effects of the electricity when it creates artificial light for us, for example. So I'm suggesting that energy is an all-encompassing field that stretches from the physical to the spiritual. If that's the case, it makes sense to talk about soul and body, or spirit and matter, but it also makes sense to talk about their oneness via energy. Just because these two poles of our being can be distinguished doesn't mean that they are radically separate metaphysical substances. What if this was all energy in vibration? Because that's what energy does. Energy is motion, vibration. In fact, you can think of emotion as energy, E in motion. Emotion is a form of energy. A thought is a form of energy. Physical activity, gymnastics, sports, moving around is a form of energy. Can we come to a global concept of energy? Because what's going on in the physical, including our bodies, may be just energy at its lowest level of vibration. And the highest aspirations of our spirit are energy at the highest levels of vibration. A bit like a spectrum. We can take white light and shine it through a prism, and it refracts into 7 colours. Violet at the high frequency end, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. Red is the lowest frequency in that spectrum. Energy is mapped on a spectrum. So just imagine that we human beings are manifestations of energy, are energy units, and that there is a sense in which the soul and the body are one. The psyche and the body. That's why we have terms like psychosomatic, where the effect of one is not disjunct from the cause and effect of the other, the psyche and the soma working together. But energy is mapped, as I say, on a spectrum. So just as visible light can be broken up into 7 colours, light itself is one of 7 bands on the whole electromagnetic spectrum that stretches from radio waves and microwaves down one end, infrared rays, visible light, and then you've got ultraviolet and X-rays and gamma rays. Gamma rays are the highest frequency. They are like the violet, using colour as a symbol here. They are like the violet in this larger spectrum. And it's just the middle slice of that spectrum that gives us our visible light with the 7 colours, 7 rays. So if energy is flooding the universe, did you have a thought there on that one, Belinda?
I was just, sorry, it was another thought to do with health, and I didn't want to bring it in yet.
Okay.
It's to do with the turbo cancers and the vaccinations, but I'm not sure if you want to touch on that.
Well, maybe we'll touch on that later. I'll continue with this energy thought. Now, I hear people sometimes talk about consciousness as though it's in the brain, in this grey matter, in this cranial box here. But it's only the effects of consciousness that we can register in the brain and measure with apparatus like the electroencephalogram, which measures brain waves, electrical activity. Think of it, and in our technological age, it's easy to find analogies. Think of a television set. There's a lot of action going on in the television show. It might be war, it might be drama, it might be performance. You don't actually think those people are in that box sitting in your living room. The television signal is beamed from afar, remotely. And then there's this play of light and signals on the screen. The television itself is just the hardware. But the show is streamed along the ethers. Your brain is just the hardware under this paradigm that I'm outlining for you. And it's up to you whether you want to subscribe to the paradigm or not. I advance it as a hypothesis, as a way of explaining things. Because whether you're looking at the hidden entities in the theories of physics and astrophysics, or whether you're looking at it from a healing end, there are always causes behind the scenes that yield effects that are manifest to us. So let's not confuse the hardware with the source of thought, life, consciousness, feeling, and so on. Now, what if this energy conveys living information in waves? I say waves, working on the analogy of light, because we know that light moves in waves. It can be resolved to waves or particles, according to that famous 2-slit experiment. Light can be photons, little particles, but it also manifests in waves. And waves move in a medium. Like sound waves require the medium of air molecules vibrating back and forth in order to propagate. If there was no air between my mouth and your ears, you wouldn't hear what I'm saying. The sound has to propagate through a medium. Sound can propagate through water too, that's a medium. But think of waves on the ocean, whether they be little ripples or tsunamis. the wave needs the medium of the water in order to move. Two children holding a long skipping rope and whipping the end creates a wave, but that wave propagates along a medium. What's the medium? Well, it's the material of the rope itself. And so when we talk about the waves of energy that thrill through the human being, we are looking at ourselves as an energy system. That means waves are crashing on our shore, right? On our body. What's the medium through which the waves propagate? Well, the term that's most commonly used by researchers is the ether or the etheric. That's the medium through which the waves propagate. The etheric was also a hypothesis in modern physics in the late 19th century, early 20th century. The luminiferous ether, because it was meant to be light-bearing. Light was imagined to flow in a medium. And then a group of scientists got rid of the need for it, and some scientists want to bring back the ether. Anyway, the generic ether conveys human energy. And so when I refer to the etheric, I mean the medium of transmission of energy. And at this stage, we're not saying how fine or how coarse that energy is. We're not saying whether it's thought, feeling, or physical action and sensation. And imagine this energy vibrating at different frequencies. You turn the dial up and you get energy on a different frequency, just like a radio, and you turn the dial and you get a new station. And the old one goes out of audibility and the new transmission comes in. So to capture or receive that living information, you need receivers. These receivers in the etheric are key centers. The 7 main centers are they could be likened to radio receivers. They could be likened to transducers or transformers. I mean, a transducer in the sense of changing one expression of energy into another expression of energy. And transformers in the sense of stepping down a voltage. We need substations connected to the power grid to step down voltage so it can flow into the houses when we're delivering electricity for home use. Well, imagine if a similar system operated under this paradigm that I'm suggesting. We'd need transformers to step down a voltage of energy so that we can use it in the physical, coming from a higher plane, as it were. One and the same energy, but stepped down. Because, I mean, it sounds technical, but it's not. Because if you imagine yourself doing something, it doesn't take very little effort, does it? You just have the thought and you're there. Imagine being in China and you're there. You imagine moving a mountain and you're there. But to do it in the physical, wow, there's a lot of effort and work involved in the physical for that to happen. That's why energy has to be transformed. High gear to low gear. In mechanics, you use gearing. In electrics, you've got transformers. So these 7 centers can receive the living information of energetic transmission at different frequencies. If one is activated, for example, if the heart center is switched on or the dial is turned there, then the consciousness of non-polarized thinking and feeling, consciousness of the other, and the consciousness of how to cooperate with the other, how to embrace the other, is received. If this center here is activated, there's a connection to the infinite and the transcendent. It might have been on your radar, as it were, until that point, and then suddenly it's on your radar in a meaningful way. And the center at the lowest most center, that red one, is to do with our attachment and physical survival. What we need to maintain our physical presence on this planet. And that's an energy center that we're all in touch with. And that's an energy center that information conveyed on energy waves is continually broadcast out by the media and by anybody that wants to emphasize the fearful dimension of life. So that base center, which externalizes in the adrenal glands, gives you your fight or flight response. Some people like to add a couple more F's in there as well. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Fawn.
Fawn as in, try to placate the danger. If the threat is another human being, you placate, you fawn. You try and be friendly towards or compliment. But these are automatic coping mechanisms. Not very creative, but more reactive. Not proactive. Think about it. When you're afraid, do you typically fight or run away? Flight.
Oh no, I don't think so.
Or freeze. You're sort of paralyzed.
You are. Yeah, you don't think so.
That's a common response. And fawn is another one. But fight and flight are the main ones. So this is what I'm trying to say. If that center is getting fed, there's going to be a real hyperactivity of the adrenal glands, and a person can be living in chronic stress.
Garambosia, yeah.
Which is bad for a body to live in heightened stress, yeah.
Some people love that energy.
Yeah. Anyway.
It's not good.
I won't go through we'll leave the going through them systematically to the next or another transmission.